So, Sasha, I am so glad that you shared that last story. He shared that at supper last night, and probably say there's a few in this room right now. In fact, I can almost guarantee it. God bless America, right? And next time you come back, we'll try to schedule some time for you to use one of those weapons and go shooting. So, her name was Amy, and Amy came to church the first time I met her. She had already decided to follow Jesus. And I was ministering in a little church in Abilene, Texas. And Amy, we were singing the last song, had the altar call, different things, and she bolted to the front. And as I was, started to talk to her, she was literally trembling. And all she could get out is, I need to follow Jesus. And I was like, okay, so try to get her to talk a little bit more. And again, just very, very agitated. But she said, I read the book of Revelation last night. I need to follow Jesus. So, and that's not the last time that has happened, where somebody has read the book of Revelation, gotten freaked out, said, I need to get serious with Jesus. Now, with that, I introduced Amy after the sermon or after the song was over, and it was kind of a cool thing because this didn't happen very much at our tiny little church. And so everybody's excited. And there was a gentleman that was there from Illinois, and he was visiting his daughter and son-in-law. Son-in-law was in the Air Force at Dyess Air Force Base. And he came up to me after the service, kind of cornered me. And I could tell, guys, you could see it on somebody's face when they're ready, like it's go time. And for him, it was go time. He was ready to fight. And so, anyway, he was a pointer. And you know what happens when guys point when they're a little bit agitated? So he was pointing at me, and he was really close. And one of the points kind of went on my chest. So if you're a dude, you know that this is like go time, right? And I wanted to go, but anyway, I decided to kind of calm myself and talk to the guy. And he said, I want you to know that if Amy dies this week before you can baptize her next Sunday, she's going to hell, and it's going to be your fault. And so it was time to go. And we probably talked for 30 minutes back and forth. I don't remember a lot of what was said, but at some point in time in the conversation, I said, what about the thief on the cross? To which he said, I don't believe in deathbed confessions. And I said, well, Jesus clearly does. And that was the wrong thing to say. So after a while, it was clear. I'm not changing my mind. He's not changing his mind. And we just kind of decided to just let this thing go. Now, it does bring up the point, though, or the question, what do we do with the criminal on the cross? What do we do with the thief on the cross? What are we to learn from this? Now, we're in the series. For the one, Jesus is unapologetically for the one who is lost, and there are many ones, correct? And so we understand that while he's on the cross, there is one to his left and one to his right, and they are both ones. They are both separated from Jesus. They lived life apart from God. And I think in this story, we're going to find out some pretty cool things about God's heart for those who are ones, who are walking apart from him. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 23, and we're going to start in verse 32. It says, two others, Jesus is again on the cross, two others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. So, I'm just going to kind of lay this out, give us this picture here. There are two criminals, both the same proximity to Jesus, both were guilty, and both were dying. Now, They said that a person could maybe live as many as 48 to 72 hours on the cross, but most died in that 5 to 10 hour range. Now, with this, I'm going to say both ones had the opportunity to cry out to Jesus, but not both ones, or both ones did not do that. Only one did. But let's go ahead and read on, starting with verse 34. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." And folks, may the story of the cross never become normal to us. May this never become like commonplace. And I think about the fact that the creator of the universe is on a cross, fully God and fully human, and his godness comes out here. And the heart of God comes out here. That people are put him through excruciating pain. He is about to die. And if you know anything about crucifixion, the Romans were experts in inflicting pain and execution. And that is what Jesus is going through. But yet he is able to say, "Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing." That is profound and profoundly just amazing. But notice what it also says here. And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched and the leaders scoffed. He saved others, they said, but let him save himself if he's really God's Messiah, the chosen one. The soldiers mocked him too, offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you're king of the Jews, save yourselves." And a sign was fashioned to the cross above him with these words, "This is the King of the Jews." Now I think about this. There's different people mentioned, but all of them are showing contempt for Jesus. All of them are mocking Jesus and making fun of Jesus. And so what we do find, though, is that there are criminals beside him. And it says here in verse 39, one of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself, and us too, while you're at it." Now, according to Matthew's gospel, both criminals were mocking Jesus. But Luke shares that while both may have mocked Jesus, one continued to mock, and one kind of changed his tune and changed his mind. I want you to look at verses 40 and 41, though. It says, "But the other criminal protested, 'Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong.'" Now, I love this here because I'm going to ask the question, what was it that caused this one to change his mind? Why did he change his mind and the other one didn't? And I think we have some clues in the text itself that kind of reveal what I'm going to say it's a conviction moment. It's that aha moment of his life happens on the cross. But notice again, verse 40, he says, or in verse 41, we deserved, no, I'll go back to verse 40, it is. Sorry, it's third service. But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die?" Now, I'm going to suggest that something happens here that I believe is a moment of conviction, something that needs to happen in every life that is coming to Jesus. He begins to wrestle with his own eternity. He comes to the realization like, oh no, I don't have much time left. I don't have much time left, and so therefore, I got to do something with this. Now, when I think about this right here, I think this is why God has given us markers in life. He said there's markers in life that I think are so cool. There's there's births, and then there's baptisms, and then there's graduation, and then there's weddings. But there's another really big marker that I think is so vitally important for people to walk through when this happens to loved ones and friends, and it's called a funeral. Because a funeral gives us the opportunity not only to honor a life, but it gives us the opportunity to reflect on our own eternity, our own life, our own finiteness. Like, this isn't going to last forever, sort of thing. In fact, I'm just going to suggest something, and it's something that all of us need to kind of grab a hold of, is that unless Jesus returns in our lifetime, there is a 100% mortality rate in this room. We will all face death. I went to Arkansas this week, saw my folks, saw my parents, ended up doing a lot of like doctoring type stuff. There are no spring chickens. Every time I leave when I go see my parents, I have that thought, this might be the last time. And it's just a reality. And so wrestling with our eternity, wrestling with the finite nature of life is something we all need to do. But also notice verse 41. It says, we deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong. So again, a couple items that happen here. Number one, he recognizes his own guilt. And what I love about this, and what's so profound, is like he lays it out all out on the line. Like, listen, we deserve to die for our crimes. He doesn't say, well, it was the circumstances in my life that led me here. He doesn't like shift blame or try to shirk responsibility. He takes full responsibility for everything that had happened in his life. And I think one of the things that we find from the very, very beginning, we find with Adam and Eve. I mean, God says, Adam, what have you done? And Adam's like, this is a woman. You gave her to me. And it's like, Eve, it's like, what have you done? Well, it's the serpent. And you get this, like, how many of y'all have kids? What do your kids do? They lie. They blame somebody else. That those things happen. And what happens when you get in trouble at work? Somebody's out to get you. Right? Your boss doesn't like you. But also this. He doesn't just recognize his own guilt. He acknowledges the innocence of Jesus. He's dying. He didn't do anything wrong. And I think this is deeper than just he didn't do a crime to take him to the cross. This is, Jesus is good. Jesus didn't do anything wrong. He didn't carry a sinful past to the cross. But the reality is this right here. One hardened his heart. The other opened his heart to Jesus. And I think about this because both men were dying. Both men were guilty. Both men were experiencing the same level of pain. Yet, one cried out to Jesus, and one was obstinate toward Jesus. And I think about pain. And I think about when we walk through pain and when people walk through pain, sometimes pain pushes people toward Jesus. Sometimes pain pushes people away. Anybody been there? Anybody seen that? Like, I have literally seen people that I've seen like walk with Jesus for many years, and they were like pillars of faith, but there was a pain point. There was a pain point, and they became incapable of seeing God's goodness because of the bitterness in their hearts because of the pain. And many of you know my wife Tara has gone through health problems, and I think gone through health problems for longer than what we would even acknowledge. But the wheels fell off in 2008. And we have walked through so many doctors and so many specialists, and we're still kind of shrugging our shoulders as far as what is actually wrong. And I will tell you that there have been moments through the years where God and I have had conversations where I have kind of let him know that I don't think he's doing a very good job. Anybody? But yet I've seen people walk through the unimaginable and never waver in their walk and their faith in Jesus. What makes the difference? I think there's a lot of answers here, but I want to go back to the criminal on the cross wrestled with his own eternity. He acknowledged his guilt. And here's the thing. When you acknowledge your guilt, one of the things you're saying is, I don't deserve anything good from God. And I know that's hard for us to hear. We don't deserve anything good from God. And that good that we do receive from him is about his goodness, not us being worthy of that. But not just that. We have to recognize that whatever we walk through in this life that is in regards to pain is nothing compared to what we really deserve. And so with that, we recognize our guilt. We look to the goodness of Jesus. We look to his perfection. And there's something that happens here that this guy doesn't just leave this with making a, if you will, a confession about Jesus. It turns into a prayer. Let's look at verses 41 and then into 42. He says, we deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. In fact, what I love about this is prayer in real time. You have a man crying out to the living God on the cross. Now, here's one of the things. This isn't a long prayer. How many of you feel guilty because you don't pray long enough? I can tell you to do something. Get out the little stopwatch thing on your phone and read through aloud the Lord's Prayer, which Jesus gave us as a model to pray. It takes about 30 seconds. And so here is a real prayer, an honest prayer, a cry out to God prayer that is simply a sentence. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Now, I want you to see what is absent here. What is not here. There is no baptism. There is no church membership. You know, I remember a day when everybody would ask the question. Of course, that was in the South. You know, where are you a church member? Where's your membership? Right? And that was a big deal. Like I went and I was in a golf tournament when I was in graduate school, and there was a guy that he and I were sharing a golf cart together, and interestingly, that proverbial "what do you do" and "what do you do" comes up. And I told him I was a graduate student, and I also preached at a little church. He goes, what church do you preach at? And I told him it was Southwest Park Christian Church. And he goes, I'm a member there. Never seen you before in my life. But that's the church world, right? And so no church membership. He never tithed. He never went on a mission trip. Some of y'all are here today. You're going on a mission trip. Good for you. But never served in the church, never even attended church. He just wrestled with his own eternity. He acknowledged his guilt. He said, Jesus is good. And then he cried out to Jesus. And I want you to see how Jesus, here, I'll say this. He realized this. And as I say this, my wife said, you preached this, I can't remember how many years ago. I never really remember preaching on this passage. But she said, you said the exact same thing. Well, it must have been good the first times, right? So the thief on the cross realizes that Jesus is his only hope. Like he had nothing to offer. Zero. There were no good works. There was nothing that he could put on a spiritual resume and say, hey, I at least got something. But it reminds me of Jesus' first words when he was preaching his first sermon in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, the Sermon on the Mount, beginning of the Sermon of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know what that means? You know what poor in spirit means? It means you're bankrupt. It means you're bankrupt before God. It means that you have nothing to offer God, that there is zero in your life, that God is going to say, you know what? You're in. In fact, I'll say it like this. When we reach the point in our life when we realize that there is nothing good, that we have nothing to offer God, and we cry out to God with the "have mercy on me, I'm a sinner," God says, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. That's when God says, I can do something with your life. And that's kind of what this man did. But notice how Jesus responds in verse 43. And Jesus replied, I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise. Listen, there's no lecture. There's no armchair quarterbacking this guy's life. Like, well, you know, reason why you're on the cross. Jesus doesn't do that. There's no test. There's no say this prayer with me. There's no sinner's prayer. Now, sinner's prayer, I'm not going to say is anti-biblical. It's just you never find it in Scripture. But there was an honest cry and plea to Jesus, and Jesus says, today, not after purgatory, today, you will be with me in paradise. There's a Scottish preacher by the name of Alistair Begg that he kind of envisions in one of his sermons what it was like for this guy. And so I'm going to show you a clip from this sermon to think what it might be like. Go ahead and watch this.
Think about the thief on the cross. And what an immense... I can't wait to find that fellow one day to ask him, how did that shake out for you? Because you were cussing the guy out with your friend. You'd never been in a Bible study. You never got baptized. You didn't know a thing about church membership. And yet you made it. You made it. How did you make it? That's what the angel must have said, like, what are you doing here? Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Well, because I don't know. Well, excuse me, let me get my supervisor. They go get the supervisor ranger. So, just a few questions for you. First of all, are you clear on the doctrine of justification by faith? The guy said, I never heard of it in my life. And what about, let's just go to the doctrine of Scripture immediately. This guy's just staring. And eventually in frustration, he says, on what basis are you here? And he said, the man on the middle cross said, I can come. Now, that is the only answer.
So he goes on to say in this sermon that if you are giving your testimony about your walk with Jesus, and your testimony begins with I or me, you are doing it wrong. It is 100% completely about the grace of Jesus. And I'll say it like this: Jesus' grace is the first and final word of your salvation. His grace is greater than your past, and His grace is greater than the worst of past that we can even come to fathom in our minds. And so with that, just let me remind everyone about this series. In fact, if this series does nothing else, I want us all to remember that there are only two kinds of people in this world. There are those who are among the 99, and there are ones who are wandering apart from Jesus. Period. And I hope and I pray that through this, and you're going to continue to hear more about the one, because as much as Jesus was unapologetically for the one, we want to be a church that is unapologetically for the one. And we want to frame our ministry around that idea that one does truly matter. If they matter to Jesus, they need to matter to us. But with that in mind, I want to remind us of this here this morning. And this is our bottom line. It's never too late for your one. If there is air in the lungs, it is not too late. And I want to challenge you to wrestle with that. And as we think about the head, heart, and hands here this morning, and I'm just going to say this, don't assume that it's too late for your one. Or it's too late for you. Okay? So one of the more favorite baptisms that we've done over the last several years was Charlie. A couple months ago, Charlie's like 82 years old. And he told me, when we were talking about his baptism, he's like, I'm tired of being angry at God. So don't assume that it's too late. In fact, if you're going to make any kind of assumption, make this assumption: God's not done with my one. And he is still writing their story. And I might have the opportunity to be part of their spiritual story. Make that assumption. I'll also say, don't stop praying for your one. Now, I'm going to share something. And some of y'all might have had some conversations like that with me. I've had conversations over the last several weeks where people have like, listen, I know my one, but we're not close. We're not close in like friendship or relationship. And some people are saying like it's gone. That relationship has been severed, but I still love them and I still want what is best for them. And there's other people saying, there's a lot of there's a lot of space between us, like geographically. We're not close. And so what should I do with this? And I was like, pray for your one. Pray that God would put people in their life to help them come to know Jesus. And pray that God will work in your heart and work in their heart, that maybe there can be some reconciliation, but continue to pray for your one. But also this, and if you're thinking about your one, or if you are a one, it's not too late, but don't wait. What I'm about to share with you is not meant to manipulate, not meant to pull your strings a little bit, because I grew up going to church camp and going to retreats and conferences and different things like that. And I grew up during the day and age where, like, if nobody came forward during the altar call song, you know, the preacher go, okay, we're going to sing that verse one more time. Because I know, I don't want to do that. But I do want to share some words from Jesus' little brother, who I think he knew a thing or two because he got to hang out with his big brother at times. And he says this in the book of James, chapter 4. Look here, you who say today or tomorrow we are going to a certain town and will stay there a year. We will do business there and make a profit. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like the morning fog. It's here a little while, then it's gone. Now, some of you know that I am not a fan of Christian t-shirts or bumper stickers. I actually still have a couple bumper stickers in my office from a couple here. Remember that sermon. But here's the thing. The problem is with Christian bumper stickers and t-shirts is sometimes they can dive into the realm of sarcasm. And I think sarcasm is one of God's greatest gifts ever, just not in evangelism. And if you have this on your car, I'm just going to ask, listen, take this one off. Because I've seen this a couple times, even here in Edgewood, so opportunity to offend. Do you follow Jesus this close? not helping. So my freshman year of college, I went to the Family Life Christian Family Store or whatever, one of the malls in the Dallas area, and I bought a Christian t-shirt. First one I ever bought. I was so proud. And it had all of the 80s like neon colors. Y'all remember those? Some of you? And it said, many people who wait for the 11th hour die at 10:30. Do you know who liked the shirt? Christians. You know what never happened while wearing the shirt? Nobody ever walked up to me and said, I've been thinking. Nobody wanted to know more. They were probably repelled by it. But I do believe that Jesus' little brother had a point. That life is fragile and life is finite, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow, let alone the rest of this day. And so while not putting a hard sell or not trying to scare or manipulate, I think, again, we say it's not too late, but don't wait. And if you're not walking with Jesus and you're walking apart from Jesus today, maybe today is the day you say yes to Jesus. And if you're thinking about your one, maybe today is the day that you begin to have that conversation, start the conversation, or even have the conversation, talking to them about their eternity and their ultimate destination and really what Jesus can do to change their life. Will you join me in prayer? God and Father, thank you for radical grace that we see in real time as Jesus encounters a one. And Father, I thank you for the one who cried out. And may we have broken hearts for those who have yet to cry out to you, to your Son. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.